Ashford, Oregon, was the kind of town people trusted. Nestled between pine forests and a winding highway, it was quiet in a way that felt intentional. The streets emptied early. Porch lights glowed softly through the night. Nothing ever happened here, at least nothing that made the news. That changed on the night of February 11th, 2020. By morning, Ashford would be known for something else entirely. The house sat at the edge of town, just past where the streetlights ended. A rented single-story home on Maple Hollow Road. For people lived there, all under the age of 24. All students at nearby Ashford Community College. They were ordinary by every definition, which is why what happened inside that house would haunt the town for years. At 6:42 a.m., a call came into Ashford Police Dispatch. The caller was a young man. His breathing was uneven. His words came out broken, as if his mind couldn't keep up with what his eyes were seeing. He said he'd come to check on his girlfriend. He said the door was open. He said no one was answering. Then he said something that made the dispatcher go silent. I think they're all dead. Police arrived 7 minutes later. They would later say the silence was the first thing that felt wrong. No music, no television, no movement. Inside the house, time seemed frozen. The victims were identified as Hannah Lowe, 23, a sociology student known for her quiet nature and meticulous habits. Jordan Pike, 22, studying computer science, described by friends as withdrawn but kind. Elena Ruiz, 21, a nursing student who worked weekends at a local clinic. And Caleb Monroe, 23, an environmental studies major who had grown up just 2 streets away. They were roommates, friends, and now victims of something Ashford had never seen before. Investigators quickly determined that all 4 had been killed during the night. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no alarm triggered. Whoever entered the house had done so easily, comfortably, as if they belonged there. The medical examiner's report painted a disturbing picture. Each victim had suffered fatal injuries consistent with a sharp instrument. The attacks were quiet, precise. There were no signs of prolonged struggle. 2 of them were likely asleep. One may have woken up. Only one showed defensive wounds. Caleb Monroe. His injuries suggested he had seen the attacker and tried to fight back. The timeline placed the murders between 2:30 and 3:10 a.m. During that window, nothing unusual was reported. No screams, no calls, no neighbors waking up. It was as if the house had simply gone dark. By noon, Ashford was surrounded by police tape and media vans. Parents flooded the campus. Classes were canceled. Students were told to stay inside. And a question spread faster than fear. How does something like this happen here? Police began where they always do. Friends, romantic partners, anyone with access. Hannah's boyfriend was questioned and cleared within hours. Elena's co-workers reported nothing unusual. Jordan had no known enemies. Caleb had no criminal history. They weren't involved in drugs. They weren't in trouble. They weren't hiding anything. At least, that's what it looked like. Then investigators found something that didn't belong. In the hallway, near the back bedroom, was a footprint. Not bloody, not obvious, but pressed faintly into the carpet. It was larger than any of the victim's shoes, and it pointed toward the exit. Security cameras from nearby homes were reviewed. Most showed nothing, until one camera, 3 houses down, captured something at 3:18 a.m. A figure walking past the edge of the frame. Tall, wearing dark clothing, moving slowly, not running, not looking back, just walking away from Maple Hollow Road. Ashford police released a brief statement. There is no immediate threat to the public. No one believed it. Gun shops sold out within days. Students slept with lights on. Some left town entirely. And those who stayed started locking doors they had never locked before. 5 days after the murders, detectives uncovered the first crack in the story they thought they were investigating. It came from Hannah Lowe's laptop. At first, it looked ordinary. Class notes, research papers, a half-finished essay saved 3 different times but never submitted. Nothing that suggested danger. Until a technician noticed a hidden folder. It wasn't password protected. It wasn't encrypted. It was simply tucked away. Inside were audio files, short recordings, each less than 2 minutes. The timestamps showed they had all been recorded within the last 3 weeks of Hannah's life. The first audio file was mostly silence. Then Hannah's voice. "Lo, careful. I don't know if I'm being paranoid," she said, "but someone keeps standing outside the house at night. Not knocking, just there." The recording ended abruptly. The second file was worse. "I think Jordan noticed it too," Hannah whispered. "He says the Wi-Fi keeps disconnecting at the same time every night. Around 3. Like someone is interfering with it." She paused. "If this sounds crazy later, please just delete this." The third file was recorded 2 nights before the murders. Hannah sounded frightened now. "He came closer tonight," she said. "I could hear breathing. I didn't tell the others. I didn't want to scare them." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added something that made investigators sit up straight. "There's something wrong with the land records Caleb found. They don't match." The file cut off. Detectives immediately turned their attention to Caleb Monroe. Caleb wasn't just an environmental studies student. He worked part-time for the county archives, digitizing old zoning and land use records. Quiet work, boring work, the kind of job no one paid attention to. Until now. A search of Caleb's computer revealed several recently accessed files, scanned documents, some over 20 years old. They involved land ownership on the outskirts of Ashford, including Maple Hollow Road. According to the records, the house the students rented technically shouldn't exist. Not legally. The land had been rezoned twice in conflicting ways. And one signature appeared on every document. The same name. A name tied to a private development firm that had quietly bought large sections of land around Ashford over the past decade. North Ridge Holdings. North Ridge Holdings was powerful. They funded town events. They sponsored the local high school gym renovation. They employed dozens of residents. On paper, they were untouchable. But Caleb's files suggested something else. Properties sold twice. Environmental reports altered. Protected land quietly reclassified. Someone had been rewriting Ashford, and the students might have noticed. When detectives interviewed Jordan Pike's classmates, another detail surfaced. Jordan had recently asked a professor about network vulnerabilities, specifically how wireless cameras could be accessed remotely without alerting the owner. At the time, it was dismissed as academic curiosity. Now, it felt different. Elena Ruiz's phone told its own story. In the days before her death, she had searched for symptoms of chronic stress and sleep disturbance. She had also texted a friend something unsettling. "I feel like we're being monitored." The friend replied with a joke. Elena never responded. By the end of the week, the case had shifted. This wasn't just about a violent intruder. It was about why 4 students might have been targeted and who would benefit from their silence. Ashford police requested assistance from the state. The request was delayed, then denied. No explanation was given. 2 days later, Detective Mark Ellison, the lead investigator on the case, received an anonymous envelope at his home. No return address. Inside was a single printed photograph. It showed the house on Maple Hollow Road, taken at night, from the tree line. On the back, written in black ink, were 4 words. "You're asking the wrong questions." Ellison never reported the photo. Instead, he locked it in his desk drawer, because by then, he already understood something chilling. Whoever killed the students hadn't panicked. They hadn't rushed. They had watched. They had waited. And they were confident enough to warn the police. On February 23rd, less than 2 weeks after the murders, North Ridge Holdings abruptly halted all development projects in Ashford. No explanation. No press release. Just silence. That same night, a neighbor on Maple Hollow Road reported seeing a light on inside the house. The power had been shut off days earlier. When police arrived, the house was dark again. Empty. Untouched. Except for one thing. On the living room wall, written faintly, as if traced with a finger through dust, was a single word. Enough. This was no longer a search for a killer. It was a warning. And Ashford was about to learn what happens when a town digs too deep. By the second week of the investigation, the tone inside the Ashford Police Department had changed. Not officially, not in any report, but in the way conversations stopped when someone walked into a room, in the way phones were answered, then lowered, in the way doors were closed. Because the deeper detectives looked, the smaller their world became. and the people they were looking at were not ordinary suspects. North Ridge Holdings did not have an office in Ashford. They didn't need one. Their name appeared on donation plaques, city permits, and redevelopment plans. They funded half the town without ever showing their face. On paper, the company was owned by a rotating list of shell corporations. But one name appeared repeatedly in internal documents recovered from Caleb Monroe's files. Thomas Weller, mid-50s, private investor, no criminal record, no social media presence, no public interviews. But he sat on the advisory board of Ashford's zoning committee for 12 years, long enough to reshape the town. Detective Mark Ellison requested an interview. The request was denied, not by Weller, by the city. The explanation was vague: jurisdictional boundaries, ongoing contractual reviews. Ellison had never seen a city protect a private citizen that aggressively. Meanwhile, witnesses began to change their stories. The neighbor who reported the late-night figure near Maple Hollow Road suddenly claimed she might have imagined it. The convenience store clerk who initially confirmed a suspicious purchase now said he couldn't be sure of the date. A campus security guard who mentioned unfamiliar vehicles near the house withdrew his statement entirely. Fear had replaced memory. Then Jordan Pike's hard drive came back from forensic analysis. Hidden deep within system folders was a log file. Not something Jordan had created intentionally, but something his computer had captured automatically. Network activity, unusual activity. Between 2 o'clock and 3:30 a.m. each night for nearly a month, an unidentified device had connected briefly to the house's Wi-Fi network. Always for less than 60 seconds. Always from the same location, just beyond the tree line. The implication was clear. Someone hadn't just watched the house. They had tested it, learned it, mapped who slept where. Ellison pushed a subpoena cell tower data near Maple Hollow Road. The request was approved, then quietly stalled. Days passed. Nothing came back. When Ellison followed up, he was told the data had been corrupted. That had never happened before. On March 3rd, something else happened. A city planning clerk named Linda Marsh failed to show up for work. At first, no one was concerned. Linda was known for taking sick days. But by the third day, her sister filed a missing persons report. Linda Marsh was the clerk who had processed the rezoning permits for Maple Hollow Road. She was also the last person to sign off on a North Ridge environmental exemption. Police searched her apartment. It was spotless, too spotless. Her phone was gone. Her laptop was missing. But one thing remained. A notebook hidden inside a kitchen drawer. Inside were dates, addresses, and a single repeated phrase written in the margins. They pressured us. That notebook never made it into evidence. It disappeared from the property room overnight. No sign of forced entry. No record of who accessed the locker. Just gone. By now, Ellison knew the investigation was bleeding out. Every time they found something real, it vanished. Every time they named someone powerful, the trail collapsed. And then his captain called him into the office. Ellison was being reassigned. Effective immediately. No explanation. No appeal. 2 nights later, Ellison received another message. This one wasn't printed. It was a voicemail. No number. Just breathing at first. Then a voice, calm and controlled. "You don't live in a big city, detective," the voice said. "You live in a place where people remember who pays the bills." Click. The next morning, news broke quietly. Linda Marsh's car had been found, abandoned near the river. The doors were unlocked. The keys were inside. There was no sign of a struggle. No body. No answers. The official statement called it an unrelated disappearance. No connection to the murders. No reason to speculate. Ashford was told to move on, but the families of the victims didn't. They noticed something else. Within weeks of the murders, North Ridge Holdings resumed development. Not in Ashford, but just outside it, on protected land that had once been flagged as unsafe. The permits were approved in record time. The message was unmistakable. The case wasn't unsolved because there were no answers. It was unsolved because the answers belonged to people no one was allowed to touch. By the end of March, Ashford had returned to routine. Classes resumed. Police tape came down. The house on Maple Hollow Road remained empty. But at night, residents reported vehicles idling near the trees. Lights flickering. Footsteps where no one stood. Someone was still watching. And the investigation was no longer about justice. It was about survival. By the time spring arrived in Ashford, the case was already considered cold. Not officially, but in every way that mattered. No press conferences, no active leads, no task force. The town had learned how to forget on command. The Monroe, Lowe, Pike, and Ruiz families were told the same thing in different words. There's nothing new. We're doing everything we can. Some cases take time. What they weren't told was how many doors had already been closed. It was Hannah Lowe's mother who refused to stop asking questions. She began going through her daughter's belongings herself. Notebooks, flash drives, old emails. Things the police had already returned. Inside a paperback book on Hannah's shelf, she found something folded tightly between the pages. A hand-drawn map. It showed Maple Hollow Road, the tree line, and a narrow path leading toward the river. At the bottom, written in Hannah's handwriting, were 3 words. Caleb was right. Mrs. Lowe turned the map over to an independent investigator. Someone outside Ashford. Someone who didn't answer to the city. Two weeks later, a drone was flown over the area marked on the map. What it found was subtle. A disturbance in the soil. A section of land that had been recently filled and leveled, but not professionally. As if something had been rushed. When excavation began, the truth finally surfaced. Beneath the soil was a concrete slab. Fresh, unregistered. And beneath that slab were remains. Not one body. Several. The remains were old. Decades old, and they told a story Ashford never wanted uncovered. Forensic analysis revealed multiple victims, men and women, none of whom matched missing persons reports from the region. Their bones showed signs of blunt trauma, restraints, careful disposal. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. The land beneath Maple Hollow Road had once been used as an unofficial dumping site, long before the house was built. Long before North Ridge Holdings appeared on paper, but not before the same names controlled the land. Records that Caleb Monroe uncovered weren't errors. They were edits. Every rezoning, every exemption, every missing environmental report, they all served one purpose: to keep that land untouched and buried. The students hadn't been targeted randomly. They had been unlucky enough to live on top of the truth, and smart enough to notice something was wrong. The independent investigator submitted his findings to the state. Within 48 hours, the site was sealed, declared a biohazard, jurisdiction transferred, and then nothing. No press conference, no arrests, no explanation for the additional remains. North Ridge Holdings issued a brief statement. They expressed condolences. They denied any knowledge. They announced the sale of all remaining Ashford-adjacent properties. Within months, the company dissolved. Its executives vanished into other ventures. Other towns, other quiet places. Detective Mark Ellison resigned from the force that summer. He never spoke publicly about the case. But to those close to him, he admitted one thing. The murders weren't about anger, he said. They were about protection. Protection of secrets. Protection of power. Protection of a past that should never be unearthed. The house on Maple Hollow Road was demolished quietly the following year. No ceremony, no announcement, just gone. A small park was built in its place. Children play there now. Most have no idea what lies beneath the grass. Officially, the Ashford Quiet Murders remain unsolved. But unofficially, the town understands. Some truths are too expensive to uncover. Some crimes are never meant to see daylight. And sometimes, justice isn't delayed. It's denied. This has been Whisper Files, and this case was buried on purpose.